Okay. I see 24 attendees, and I believe that they can hear us. Iris?
Yes.
I'm going to recommend that we just hold on for another couple of minutes. We were expecting a few more people, and then we'll get this broadcast started. Oh, I get it. Right, Iris, I think it's probably appropriate to get started now. I've got 11, given a chance for everybody to join us. If you could begin the recording, we will begin this presentation.
Great. Well, thank you for joining us for today's webinar, Improving Clinical Workflows with Siemens and AppSense. If you have any questions during the webinar, please type them into the question box. And without further ado, I would like to present Simon Cleffin.
Thank you very much, Iris. I appreciate this opportunity to be presenting on this topic, an area of considerable interest to AppSense, Siemens, and to Korea Delta. AppSense is the technology vendor and capabilities in this space. Siemens in terms of our partner enabling some of these technologies, and Korea Delta, who we've invited on as a customer success story, actually using some of the technology, a case study. And we'll be calling upon Nick Volosin to talk a little bit later on. I'm also be working with Jim Kaler and Paul Pettit to talk a little bit about the Siemens Saurian Information Access Solution. So welcome to this presentation, and thank you for attending. We actually have a couple of polling questions. A, to find out a little bit about what's hot on your list as an attendees of interest, and B, to make sure everybody stays awake during the presentation, because we'll be doing one at the beginning and one at the end. Iris, can you bring up the first polling question, please? So if you could, we'd like to ask you what your experience is with bring your own device projects at this time. This appears to be a very important driving factor. What happened to the polling question? I thought it had to remain up for us to do the poll.
Yeah, no, it shut down for a second. Please proceed. I'll work on this.
Okay. Well, we're working on pulling the polling question back up for you, so bear with us 1 second, please, and we'll see what happens. Brief overview of the agenda today. Basically, we want to talk a little bit about what we see going on in the healthcare space, what is impacting information technology in healthcare, discussion about how Saurian and Siemens are implementing some of these capabilities, and then lastly, the real focus on a customer case study with Korea Delta, and we're delighted to have Nick on this call, as I say. We'll finalize with a quick demonstration of some capabilities. That is not the target of this presentation. If you have a desire, we would be delighted to set up separately with you a specific demonstration of our technologies to show you a little bit more about what we do. But we will be showing you just a very quick demonstration of these capabilities, and then we'll summarize and cover any questions and answers at the end of this presentation. Whilst we're continuing to see and get the polling question up, I thought I'd just give you some thoughts on what we're seeing in the market at the moment. AppSense has been in business for about 11 years. Healthcare is the #1 vertical where we're selling our user virtualization technology. This has a very high impact on our business, and we're seeing tremendous demand from hospitals and clinical establishments as to improving the overall operation of their facilities and making overall clinicians' experience better, and the IT world or the IT healthcare people's experience more effective and more productive. We have customers like Seattle Children's, the Center for Disease Control, University of Texas Medical Branch, Army Medcom, Catholic Healthcare Initiative, Children's Health. So literally customers who vary anywhere between like 500 to 150,000 users in one of our largest medical facilities. So we have a wide variety of use cases and issues that we're seeing with these people, with these clients. And what we're seeing is enormous requirements for controlling, bring your own device, for controlling the clinician's experience, at the same time ensuring the security and compliance of mission-critical applications is becoming increasingly important because regulation is driving this business. Control of information, as we all know, is mission-critical. It appears we're having quite some issues with that polling question and the display, so I think we may pass on that. There's an infinite amount of users who can do it. Apparently we're having some login issues with the webinar. I'm afraid to say we're going to have to struggle on a little bit with that one, and I will have Iris, have you any idea why we might be having login issues?
I'm really not sure what's going on the GoToWebinar side, but we will make sure to get the recording of this webinar out to everyone in case they're unable to log in.
Okay, thanks very much. And as I say, the polling question appears to have flummoxed us, so we will pass on beyond that and just talk a little bit about what we're seeing in the market today. So, enormous number of new devices, new apps, unique configurations, and mobile workforce driving this industry, driving the healthcare business, leading to, next slide please. Iris, next slide. Which is significantly impacting the productivity of the clinical desktop today. What we're seeing is a key requirement for consistency, repeatability, scalability, and manageability. These are the issues that we're facing, and if we can deliver solutions with VDI that work across these different devices, that work across these different implementations with a consistent experience, with a repeatable experience, so we can add new users, add new facilities with ease, with a scalable experience so we can move up to hundreds of thousands. As I say, our largest deployment, about 150,000 seats, with a manageable experience, then we see productivity going up, then we see an overall improvement in performance. Next slide, please. And that is driving us to try and meet these challenges with solutions like the Saurian Information Access solution that is, I'm going to turn over to Jim Kaler to talk a little bit about, and essentially improving the overall clinician's experience, at the same time not sacrificing IT and reducing the IT overload, which is what most of us, I suspect, on this phone call are most worried about. So without further ado, I'm going to pass off to Siemens now, and I'd like to introduce Jim Kaler from Siemens. Jim, over to you, please.
All right. Thank you, Simon. I appreciate it. for having us join you today. We've done a lot of great things and look forward to more in the future as we develop our partnership. So what we're going to do is talk a little bit about SOAR information access. Joining me specifically for this portion of the webinar is going to be Paul Pettit. Paul is one of the senior consultants with our practice, and then we'll also get to Nick Bolson next. So, Iris, next slide, please. This slide had some animations, and we'll go ahead and build out the slide here. So SOAR information access is actually it's multiple components that we bring together to deliver on a user experience, specifically targeted at improving that clinical workflow, the driving down costs, availability, and performance. So some of the things that we bring together start around the hub or the central focal point, which is virtual desktop infrastructure, and bring in single sign-on, authentication management, tap and go authentication, proximity cards that most people are familiar with, context and location awareness, so patient context, user context, etc., where I'm located to help print location driving. Then we transition into user virtualization and personalization, and Paul's going to speak specifically to that and how we tie into the AppSense solution. And then we round that hub out with performance monitoring. So we've sized the system correctly. Now we're going to ensure the performance of the VDI solution. And then we tie all of that together with knowledge and experience. So Siemens has been in healthcare business for many, many years, and we use that expertise along with the technology expertise that we've learned and gained in virtualization of both the server and desktops, bringing that to bear to deliver on that overall experience. Again, it's not VDI, it's not single sign-on, it's not one, it's everything together with the knowledge and experience to deliver on that end-user clinical workflow improvement, drive down that cost, availability, and performance. Paul's a subject matter expert in this area, and I'm going to turn it over to him, and he's going to walk us through how SIA ties in with AppSense. So, Paul?
Thanks, Jim. As Jim mentioned, VDI really is at the center of our SIA solution, but it alone doesn't really improve the clinical workflows. It adds some functionality like roaming, the ability to move between the different machines and environment, but we use a lot of other tools to help deliver an improved experience. If you look at this slide, the idea here is that you've got a lot of use cases within your facility. You know, you've got surgeons, you've got general practice physicians, you've got nurses, you've got admission clerks. Each person has a different use case, so it's really important for you to go through and define each one of those use cases. If you don't do that, really what you're doing is taking your existing environment and just moving into the data center, which adds some benefit like security, but you're really not improving the user's experience by doing that. So some other things that you need to think about is the location of the users. When they're moving from location, it's not the same in the traditional environment, you know, where they'd be on an endpoint, you'd be able to map those other printers and all the other location-based information. If you look at this next slide, this kind of shows the methodology that we go through when we're doing an assessment. You know, we'll take all of those existing desktops, we'll look at them and say, okay, what are these users actually using? What's their daily workflow? What are the applications that they have? And then how do they actually use their machine? Do they move between machines? Are they staying in the same spot? Do they move between locations? So what we try to do in that process is just sort of put that through the funnel, if you look at this slide, and create a master image you know, that would be applicable to all the users by defining all the common denominators. From there, we'd add the proximity card authentication, which helps to simplify the login process, and then we add location-based printing with AppSense. After you've got that master image, you've kind of created a generic environment that all of your users would be able to access, but it doesn't really have any of the user-specific customization. So that's where AppSense kind of comes into play for us in a big way, where we add the user virtualization. If you go to the next slide there, Eilers. So this slide here kind of shows how we're separating the stack of the desktop. So you've got the device, you've got the OS, the application, and you've got the user experience. With AppSense, we're able to extract that user experience, and it will be separate from the applications, the OS, and the generic master image, but all the user settings would be separate. So it allows you to consolidate everything down to that master image, but still give all of the users their own experience. If you go to the next slide, it kind of shows some of the additional benefits that you get with AppSense and with user virtualizations. On the user side, it can improve the application delivery. You have one master image, and then you'd be able to apply shortcuts to their desktop based on their role and what they do or where they're at. It would decrease login times because you can take away a lot of the policy that would be applied normally during the login period and have AppSense apply that based on triggers. On the admin side, as I kind of discussed, it would decrease the number of images that you have because you can have one master image and then you'd apply all of the user-specific settings separately. You'd be using less storage because you're not saving all of that information in a traditional environment. And it adds some additional functionality with security and management. And I think Nick will go into a little bit more detail here. Switch to the next slide. I'll go ahead and pass it over to Nick. He's worked extensively with Siemens on VDI, AppSense, user virtualization, and he's going to tell you about some of the work that he's done at Kuya Delta.
Hey, thanks, Paul. It's been great working with Paul and Jim over the last few months, and enhancing some of the VDI. Like Paul mentioned, it's not just VDI just taking it from physical PCs into the data center doesn't solve the issue. So, as we look at some of the functions of AppSense in the next few slides, we'll talk about how AppSense can help you streamline the delivery of applications and desktops. So Kuya Delta is currently 581 licensed beds. They're growing. They're going to grow by about another 60 beds over the next year. Over 80,000 ER visits, and serves a large geographic area. So primary is farming area, 3,500 employees. But in that, there's over 300 physicians that they support. So like most organizations, there's some challenges. So some of the challenges are, how do we do, more with less, of course, but how do we make the desktop easier to manage? So as we provide more access to clinicians and have that, all that fully electronic record. So as we go to the meaningful use initiatives, how do we have that anywhere, anytime access and reduce the amount of security requirements of the desktops? So how do we manage the desktops? How do we get the best value out of the desktop? So how do we maximize the use? How do we make the user experience better than it was with physical PCs? So how do we decrease the login times? And also with the pressure of BYOD. So how do we, as doctors bring in their MacBooks and iPads and Android tablets, how can we support that and provide them a consistent user experience regardless of device? So we look back at a snapshot of Kuya, like state of the PC desktop delivery back in 2007 at Kuya Delta. Pretty much was physical PCs using traditional deployment tools like Alteryx and group policies, and trying to manage multiple types of desktops and versions of operating systems. So kind of doing a lot of sneakernet at that time. Had Citrix, but it was mostly for remote access. So it was the physicians' offices, how they could get to it remotely. So Citrix was primarily just for remote access, and they were just physical servers, so not taking advantage of any virtualization. So fast forwarding to today's environment, it's now just using Citrix, delivering it through Zen servers for the desktop and application virtualization, and it's over 200 virtual servers, connecting over 1,500 users, concurrent users, and delivering over 100 applications. So the mix now is 70% thin client devices, and about 30% still physical PCs. So that's growing, as they age out or need to be replaced, or if there's a remodel or new applications, then they're switched out to thin clients. So in the clinical areas, it's probably more more than 90% thin clients and 10% traditional PCs in the clinical areas. So Quidelta's vision, which all this virtualization and providing this unique, seamless experience of the desktop delivery, is in alignment with the vision statement from our CIO, which is the 6 rights. So it's be able to provide the right information to the right person at the right place, right time, in the right format, and at the right value. And so in looking at how we can optimize the desktop and application delivery, we're looking at how to change and transform and do that desktop transformation, so we're not spinning up a desktop just so that it's idle waiting for someone to use. So how can we maximize, going back to that, maximizing the hardware. So when we're looking at how to benefit from the virtualization, it's how to have that centralized management, like Paul talked about, trying to get to a single image so you can do all your updates and patches in one place. Having that high availability, so how can we have it so that the desktop is in the data center, but if we do have a failure of a host, how can we resume operations to the clinicians as soon as possible so they can get to their applications, get to the information they need to deliver medications, to look up results. And it's how can we do our updates to those applications fast. So with all the new applications coming out for meaningful use, CPOE, med administration check, how can we deploy those out without having to do it the traditional way of installing applications on C drives? And then again, on the failover, how can we create like an always-on or high availability point of care end user computing experience? So taking advantage of virtualization to deliver that. So I mentioned before about having the anywhere, any device access. So some of our what we call endpoint sprawl is in alignment with some of our projects. We had expansion, so a whole new wing, new beds, rolling out some meaningful use applications like med administration check and CPOE, and also expanding out into the clinics to provide a point of presence without having to go to the emergency room. So how can we have these clinics based in those agricultural areas so people can go there for their care versus using the ED as a walk-in clinic? And then, of course, BYOD. So again, this doctors, physicians bringing in their own devices and wanting access. So with virtualization, and it's only as good as your weakest link. So I have this slide there. Is so doing that assessment work, looking at what exists. So what's the network look like, the Active Directory, storage. IOPS plays a big part in having the right performance monitoring tools in place to make sure as you scale out, you have the right configuration and the right virtualization infrastructure. So whether it's VMware or Citrix or a combination, having the right skill mix in your IT department and knowing how to support it. And then, of course, security. So bringing that, as you bring the desktops into the data center, how can you provide a secure access to it? So, with the roaming, using badge access, using dual authentication with a PIN or with a token. So with the virtualization, it's like Paul mentioned with the golden image, it's not one size fits all. So if you were to use just VDI by itself without any tools to enhance it, you would just have one image, or you would have 30, 40 images for every use case. So what AppSense helps you do is to have that single image, but then only deliver what applications users are entitled to. So as you have a large base of knowledge workers like nurses and case managers, and then you have power users like physicians, radiologists. You can provide different user experiences and point them to different types of desktops using the tools that that Jim and Paul talked about. So when we look at switching from device-centric to user-centric, we talked about the desktop transformation. And so when we look at how desktops were deployed before a personal desktop, the red dots indicate we have PC in every room, so those would be spinning an OS, having to be supported, having to be patched, having to have the applications upgraded. And so when we start looking at the virtual infrastructure and creating a personal experience so that when they tap in to the computer with their badge and reconnect to their desktop, it's more about the number of concurrent users versus concurrent devices or active devices on the floor. So this diagram kind of shows a typical nursing unit and what was before and after. And so as the users roam around, so I don't know, Iris, if you can click, I think there's some animation on it. With the green dots, they're floating around from device to device. So when we look at, again, the advantages of device-centric to user-centric, it's creating that desktop as a service model. So instead of having a PC that's logged in as a generic device and has all the applications that someone might use, so there might be 40, 50 icons, and you walk up to a second PC and they might not be arranged in the same order, so it adds frustrations to the clinician. So it's creating an experience where the user has their own preferences. They only have the icons they need based upon their Active Directory group membership or based upon location of the device. So it's creating that personal experience, but also having that dynamic access so they can use different devices that fit their workflow, whether it's going from a PC switching to a tablet back to a PC, or even using an iPhone or an Android phone to bring up something small to review that might make sense for that point in time. So when we talk about the combination of components that are like in storing information access, it's really about the authentication management with single sign-on, the virtual infrastructure, and the user virtualization. So bringing those strategies together and then adding on top of that monitoring, that's what makes a success for the clinical workflow. So Kuya Delta, they branded it MyKD, so My Kuya Desktop. So some of the advantages, it provides that personal desktop, smooth roaming from different devices. The timing of it in 2009 fit well with the iPad launch. So we had the Citrix in place where when the iPad 1 came out, we were able to deploy that. And actually the weekend that came out, we had 2 physicians rounding with an iPad 1 onto the Siemens storing applications. So again, using the AppSense user virtualization allows us to customize that desktop for the individual role of the different users. So having one master image, but only displaying the icons and preventing access to other applications based upon their Active Directory group. And then the implementation of single sign-on, so bringing on things like an iPad where people can launch an application not having to constantly put in their username as passwords, was a great end-user satisfier by providing that automated access into applications and not having to bring up the pop-up keyboard. Also minimizes the number of touches that a clinician has to do inside of a patient room to minimize infection control, where they can walk in, tap their badge, and be right where they left off on their screen. So it can provide kind of a stepping stone to enhancing other clinical workflows. And then the ease of integrating other applications, because now the users are logging into the desktop as their own identity. So not a shared, Nurse Station 1 login. It's actually logging in as their name, so they can have their email up and improve communications with their department, their manager, and the organization. So just some highlights of successes we've had with the user virtualization. We've been able to improve the amount of time it takes to deliver devices. So being able to have that standardized back-end infrastructure where we can just deploy thin clients or any device really, so it becomes device independent. So whether or not it's a thin client, an iPad, again, just treating the iPad just like a thin client. So being able to deploy it fast, improving login time. So as the users log in, AppSense is taking care of all the drive mappings and things that would normally be done by traditional login scripts, but also being able to make it where people can reconnect. So they're reconnecting anywhere between 3 to 10 seconds depending on device, the type of device it is. But so again, saving all those cycles that a nurse or doctor would normally have to do every time they walked up into a workstation. And there's increasing pressure with all the meaningful use applications, that they're going to be doing more and more interactions with the computer. So, it's very important to try to reduce the number of clicks and the number of seconds it takes to access the systems. Having that standardization, but having a predictable user environment. So every, because it's coming from one image, every application behaves the same, as you reconnect. And versus having when you had physical servers, you had to make sure everyone installed the applications in the same process and DLLs didn't get modified. So again, having that master image improves that. And one of the big things is being able to transform desktop support to more end user support. So as we take some of the hardware issues out of the endpoint device, we're not dealing with hard drives or fans. We're actually dealing more with the user experience now. So transforming that role of desktop support to end user and enhancing the time spent with the end user and working more with the meaningful use applications on CPOE and Mac. So being able to have more time for that. Next slide. There we go. So I had that one slide that was showing, not one size fits all. So, one advantage of the tools that are in Soaring Information Access is being able to not have to have one choice. You can decide, what type of end user experience works for what types of users. So when you're looking where you can get more density per user, on the back end, there's some more complexity with solutions like that, but the benefits are getting more bang for your buck on the servers, versus the VDI where you're having the desktop OS. So you have the simplicity of a normal desktop OS that people are used to, that the software vendors are used to, but you don't get quite the density on the back end. But so you can choose by different groups of users or even the locations of devices to have it connect in a different way. And this is where AppSense then really plays, because if you have a hybrid solution, AppSense can make sure you have consistency in as far as the applications that are showing up on the desktop and the settings, registries, printer mappings between multiple Windows environments, whether it's physical or virtual. So this is a diagram. I just wanted to throw this on a slide so you'd have it, but this is kind of a high level of the infrastructure at QuidelTA using Citrix with Zen server, but then using VMware for the core infrastructure servers. So there's different components, and they're labeled with the Zen server logo and the VMware logo, respectively, of where they live. I just wanted to have this slide in the deck for you. So this is an example of a personal desktop. So this is one of my desktops, and it has the applications that I use. It has customized, so when someone walks up to the screen, if I haven't disconnected or hasn't timed out, it's easy to identify who is using that desktop. A user could then just come back and tap that session out, tap over that session, get their session. My session's still disconnected, waiting for me to reconnect from any location. And so with AppSense, what I found over the last few months visiting many organizations is you always have that one person that can do a lot of tricks using VB script. And so this is an example of a person that has to have a lot of caffeine and staring at all those command line screens and keeping up with all your VB scripts that might be doing some magic under the covers. And so what I found is, over the last 3 years that, AppSense is that tool that really helps you standardize that delivery and have all that magic, but in a very intuitive way that can be supported. It's backed up. It's highly available, versus a folder full of VB scripts trying to do all this magic. So when we look at some of the main things that we've used AppSense for is, it has triggers. And so when we talk about trying to enhance end-user experience and workflow, it's taking advantage of these events. So when you have, it knows when a computer starts up, stops, process starts, stops. The main ones we typically use is when a user first logs on and logs off, and when they reconnect, disconnect, because that's when we know there's been a change in status of the user. They're no longer either entering a desktop or they're leaving a desktop. And so it's using those events to make other things happen behind the scenes. So with triggers, we also have, with the next slide, conditions. So as opposed to a lot of just VB scripts or GPOs, is now we can apply based upon active directory group, the computer name, IP address, certain things in the registry. We can make things happen. So we know the event, they just reconnected, we know where they connected from, and so now let's do something about it. So then the next thing was we have actions on the next slide. So when we have actions now, we can do things like execute programs or VB scripts or PowerShells. We can do drive mappings. We can set environment variables. We can actually do group policies. Now the power is not having a group policy just on OU, or if you belong to a certain active directory group. It's now more dynamic, where it's conditional based upon the location of that device. So you could have something like enforce lockout Internet Explorer in the ER, but when a user logs in the medical staff lounge, don't block Internet. So those are the kind of use cases, as Paul was mentioning with the big grid, is that you can find hundreds of different types of use cases that people come up with, and typically with all these triggers, conditions, and actions, you now have a mechanism to make those things happen. So what I want to do is just quickly, we only have a little bit of time, but just kind of bring up the tool, kind of just walk through a couple little features of AppSense, just so you can kind of see. I have should be coming up here. Iris, can I confirm that you see the screen?
Yep, we can see your screen there.
Okay, thanks, Simon. So this is the Environment Manager tool where you build a configuration. So I just wanted to kind of walk through just a couple things that we typically see. And one of the big things that AppSense helps solve is location-based printing. So when we look at setting up location-based printing, we typically do it based upon the client's name. So working with the client during the assessment phase and seeing, making sure they have a naming convention of their endpoints. So when we see that they have, we establish this is a sample hospital, right? So the campus is IRH. So we can see that the client name contains that, so it starts with that. And then we can see that it also contains, their CICU unit. And so when it detects that, now we can start setting things. So we start unmapping the printers because we know they just came on. They weren't in that unit before, right? So it says making sure they're not just roaming from one computer to another in the same unit. So then it will unmap their printers and then start to set the environment variables, write an INI file for like back-end printing, and then map their Windows printers. You could just as easily set up something so that an application would start automatically. So you could say, if this computer starts in the ER, then automatically launch the the ER application. So in these nodes, we can basically build this filter. So make, is it part of the CICU? Is it part of the 3 East unit? So same thing, looks to see if it's in the 3 East. Were they already in the 3 East? If not, let's unmap the printers and let's set up the new printer. So somewhat simple, easy to navigate, easy to change. Right? If you wanted to change printer, you can do it here. If you want to set multiple printers, you would just set one as the default. So these are what they call reusable nodes. So when you put it here, that means you get to reuse it. So pretty self-explanatory there. So we can set conditions. Here's the conditions we talked about earlier where we have log on, log off, and so on. So we just reference that when they log on for the first time of the day, run that reusable node. So you only have to edit one place because we also want to use it when they reconnect. So this is when they are basically disconnecting with their badge and then reconnecting. We can also set up application shortcuts. So we want to look at, you can push icons, and again, you can make these condition-based. So you can say if it belongs to a group, if computer name starts with this, or IP address of the client is this. You can also detect protocols. You could say if it's coming in through Citrix, present this icon, but if it's through RDP, do this icon or shortcut. So again, just setting up normal shortcuts. But the advantage is you can do things that are self-healing. So if an end user actually deletes it, you can have it automatically recreate that. I can kind of show a quick example of that. Here, let's go to a quick desktop. So the Siemens soaring application. So if the user accidentally, hit their delete key, and the icon goes away, but within a few seconds, it comes back. So self-healing. So you can actually, have it reduce your calls to the help desk because you can force those icons to always be fairly persistent. You can do the same thing with files. So there's lots of things around the host file that could be part of, malicious attacks. And then another part of the tool, so I went through the environment manager, that's where you do your configuration, but then to deploy the configuration is using the management console. Again, just quickly kind of go over this, is where you can create different groups. So basically create collections of devices. So they can be, you can separate physical PCs, Zen app, Zen desktop, view, terminal services. You could have different configurations so that you can deploy different configurations that you may want to choose for different use cases. Like Paul was mentioning, you can come up with hundreds of different ones, but you can basically put out there what kind of configuration you want to assign configuration file. And you can put it there, and you can say always use latest and what tools you want to deploy, and it will automatically push that out to the different endpoints. So easy to manage, easy to install agent to the different Windows servers and endpoints. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Simon.
Great. Thank you very much, Nick. And in summary, I'm going to sort of quickly run through some of the things that I heard today, and hopefully this is a good summary for everybody, and we'll, if we get lucky, we'll try the polling question in just a second, but I'm not convinced we're going to get this to work. But thank you, everybody, for your time. And what I heard today was, here are some tools to help improve both the clinicians and IT's experience. Support for things like multiple devices. So we have support for desktop, tablets, and smartphones, which we believe is driving a lot of innovation, security, compliance, a lot of issues at new facilities, and I'm sure you're facing those wherever you are. Nick was keen to point out the importance of speed of access. I'd also point out the consistency of access speed is also time and time again that you need to make sure that the doctors have a consistent experience, because that's what they expect and that's what makes them happy when they know how long it's going to take to do some other, and it's the same every time. I love the desktops. The complexity of those desktops are the things that really confuse people. Our ability with these types of tools to be able to manage that and make it come back consistently to be the same structure really helps with that overall productivity. We're seeing more and more consolidation in the healthcare field. So what that means is now you're mixing and matching different applications, different meaningful use applications coming together, different hospitals at different stages of their development. And what we can do with these types of tools is bring that experience together better. Lastly, we're seeing a lot of people with requiring the migration from Windows XP to Windows 7. That is a deadline looming in front of us. April 2014 is when support stops for Windows XP. And this type of technology, the abstraction of the user, as Paul was talking about, really helps with those migrations. And then my final point is basically, there are always going to be applications that require special configuration. A good example is some of the healthcare clients we've worked on. Specific applications only work with certain versions of Internet Explorer. So what happens when you've got the wrong version of Internet Explorer started and that application starts up? Things like AppSense can then reconfigure your system, close down the incorrect version of Internet Explorer, bring back the correct version, set the right registry keys, and make sure that you have the productivity you need, all without the end user having to worry about these things, making that high-quality clinician's experience. So hopefully this has shown you given you a quick summary of the sort of things you can do in the area of improving clinical and IT healthcare field and clinical workflows. I'm going to try for the polling question. We'll just give it a couple of minutes and see if that actually works. Iris, can you bring up that question for us, please? And what we were hoping to do is just get a little bit of understanding about, where meaningful use is within your facility and how you would see something other like this solution enhancing your ability to implement meaningful use, and how you could effectively use this for managing some of those meaningful use applications that Nick was talking about earlier on. Is the polling actually working?
Yes, it is.
It's a miracle. We have the technology. Yes, we have. And it looks like as we go through this, we've got about 36%, 39% voted. Thank you. As you go through this, we'll carry on this for another 20 seconds, and then we'll move to have a quick look at the results, and then we'll open up for questions and answers. So if anybody has any questions or concerns or thoughts they'd like to share with the people who are assembled on this call, please feel free to type them in, or alternatively, I believe we can open up the phone lines to the attendees.
Hey Simon, one thing I'd like to add, this one slide here may not resonate with everyone, how this solution can help them meet meaningful use, but think about this, some parts of the meaningful use are adoption of CPOE. So one thing we need to do for the users is make that experience as easy as possible. And they're not there to practice IT, they're there to practice medicine. And to deliver healthcare, they shouldn't necessarily be maybe they don't want to be the most technical person, and they want to get in, quickly do their work efficiently, fast, move to the next patient, and deliver care. So again, it may not resonate to them, but making the adoption of technology easier is what this solution can provide. So.
Yeah, and so rounding that out, I think the ability to use experts in this field really helps with jump-starting these projects. What we've found is that there is a lot of built-in knowledge, capabilities, experience that essentially the Siemens, the Saurian Information Access team can really help bring to a party and bring to a new facility as we implement this. And that's why we're delighted to be partnering with Siemens on this project, and I believe that we have seen some of the benefits of this. So Very positive response from the quick poll. Appreciate your feedback on that. I'm going to open it up for questions now. Iris, can we open up the phone lines and see if there anybody has any questions at this time, please?
Yes, so the first question we actually had come in was regarding how this exact workflow has helped with CPOE adoption.
Yeah, I'll take that, Iris. This is Nick. Yeah, the CPOE, so providing that anywhere, anytime, any device access. So as we roll out CPOE to physicians, and traditionally physicians could just phone in an order or fax, have their staff fax an order. So now as they're having to do their own ordering, providing that quick access from a device they're comfortable with from either home or in the hospital, it helps the burden of now having to learn a new process. So again, they can use a device they're comfortable with, an iPad or tablet, but actually then having them reconnect right where they left off, so minimizing the amount of time it takes to get to the application, so that they can get to the CPOE fast. That's the important part of it. So it does definitely help in that delivery.
Great, thank you. And the next question we have in the queue is, how do you support roaming users? I think that's for Nick as well.
Yeah, roaming users with AppSense, it will store the unique settings that IT deems that they want to have stored into a SQL server. So AppSense will store it. So in the SQL backend, you have that using Microsoft SQL technologies. You can have it be replicated or mirrored, so to make it highly available. So as a user reconnects, they'll get the settings that they need to have their user experience. And so instead of having just the traditional roaming profiles that get copied at login and log off, it'll actually, when it reconnects, it'll stream from the SQL server those settings and apply it on top of the default profile that make it unique to that user.
Great, thank you, Nick. And again, if you have any questions, please type them in the question box. In the meantime, we have another question regarding proximity printing. How do you handle proximity printing from tablets and or mobile devices?
I think that one's for Paul. I think Paul would probably be the best person for that.
Sure. So there's a couple ways we can do that. Either we can identify the host name of the endpoint that the user is connecting from, or we also have a solution where the user can print to a virtual printer and then go to a machine and tap their badge to retrieve their job. Either one of those would help to solve the issue of the location of the user with printing.
Yeah, and what's great with that, so with AppSense, we can determine whether or not they're coming from a tablet device. So we can actually then, that again, going back to those triggers, is that we would know it's from an Android or iPad device, and if the use case is, always make that go to a tap printing solution versus a proximity, because we wouldn't necessarily know where their tablet is. We can make that the default printer, and so that it will print there and hold it for them, and then once they go up to the printer, like Paul was mentioning, and tap, it would then release that job where they just tapped on the printer.
Great. Well, it looks like that's all the questions we have at this time. Do any of you have any closing remarks?
Well, Iris, this is Jim. I certainly wanted to thank Simon and yourself, AppSense, for inviting us to your presentation, Paul, and Nick for presenting as well. They're the brains behind this, and they do a great job. Lots of years of expertise, and I personally believe that with what we're trying to do with storing information access, bringing these technologies together, such as AppSense, will deliver on that clinical experience. So again, I appreciate it and thank you, and thank those that took the time out of their day to join this webinar.
Indeed, we appreciate the time, everybody on this call. You can see on the last slide there's a bunch more information available both on the Siemens website and on the AppSense website. We'd be delighted to share more success stories, more information, show you a little bit more depth about what we can do, and hopefully this has sparked an interest in some of you to follow up As I say, we really appreciate your time. If you do have any further questions, want to email us, I'm more than happy to assist. Looking forward to working with you. Thank you, everybody, for attending this. Iris, I think we're done.
Great. Thank you so much. Have a great day.
Thanks, everybody.